My name is Nicole Nelson. I'm a second-year doctoral student at Vanderbilt University. Um, I did my undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania. I graduated from there in 2011, and I am originally from Levittown, New York. And what drew me to South Orange? A couple of things drew me to South Orange. One, I really wish that I had lived in a community like South Orange growing up. Levittown, New York, as you may know, kind of has a reputation for not being very diverse, and that's to put it mildly. Actually, Mr. Levitt, he prevented African Americans from residing in the community for a number of years. And unfortunately, Levittown still has a legacy of not being the most diverse community, still about 92 or 93% white. And to hear about South Orange, it was a breath of fresh air. I didn't know places like this existed that were just almost perfectly racially balanced suburbs. I always thought of suburbs as predominantly white. So that was the first reason, a personal reason, coming from a not diverse community at all to a very diverse and rich community like South Orange. The second reason was, as Ms. Severi mentioned before, when she introduced me, I called up one of my former professors at the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Thomas DeGrew, and I was telling him about my project, how I originally wanted to write about African American suburbanites' experiences in predominantly white, low and middle income suburbs. And with that, he said, well, there's only a few communities where you have a documentation of African American suburbanites living in these communities. And he said the two places are South Orange and Maplewood, New Jersey, and Shaker Heights, Ohio. So because my hometown put me in closer proximity to South Orange, New Jersey, and Maplewood than Shaker Heights, Ohio, that kind of like pushed it over the edge. But that's not to take away from the two towns' reputation, where I was highly interested in after reading several New York Times articles about how people cited diversity, both black and white residents cited diversity as their reason for moving here, the tight-knit feeling, all the cultural events. Now, I remember reading one of the advertisements that the Community Coalition on Race posted in the New York Times saying, what do South Orange and Maplewood, New Jersey have in common with New York City? Live jazz, mozzarella, and fresh bread. And I said, oh wow, this is a really interesting place. So as I did more and more research, I shifted my original objectives from investigating African American suburbanites' experiences to seeing, how did this town integrate the way that it did. And that's what led me to South Orange. I know I just answered so many questions. Sorry about that.
That's perfect.
Okay.
That's totally fine. So what did you find out?
I found out how South Orange and Maplewood voluntarily integrated over a 50-year process, and that was interesting to me as someone who has one of their specialties in urban history. And usually the traditional narrative, at least in urban history, that you're probably familiar with is one of white homeowners getting a bit nervous about their community diversifying because they're not sure what it will mean for property values. And I found it interesting that a predominantly white community would voluntarily integrate, and I was curious as to why. So starting with the Fair Housing Council in 1963, they said it isn't integration that harms a community. It's white flight and people selling below market value that harm a community. Because if you think about it, if people are selling below market value, they're not selling at the correct value of their homes, so they're damaging property values. And if you just have people moving out, that also damages property values. But if you introduce a number of different people into the market, then that'll cause property values to increase because you have an increase in competition. So I found out the process by which different groups like the Fair Housing Council, Friends and Neighbors, and South Orange Neighbors, and last but not least, of course, the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race, voluntarily integrated the community over a nearly 50-year period using very intentional methods to deter unsavory realtor practices like what you might have like block busting which is the practice of, say a minority family moves in, using that as a scare tactic to encourage white families to move out and then change the racial composition of the area.
Yeah.
Realtor steering, preventing white homeowners and or black homeowners from seeing certain neighborhoods. You might assume that white homeowners might be more comfortable in a white neighborhood, so a realtor might show them only white neighborhoods, or black potential home buyers that they would be more comfortable residing in an all-black neighborhood instead of showing them, mixed neighborhoods. So they combated that. And then they also had processes to integrate how the Community Coalition on Race, for instance, directly targeted whites, let's say from Park Slope, Brooklyn, who were already accustomed to living in diverse areas. So they were used to that diversity, so they put ads in newspapers that went to Park Slope, Brooklyn, or different parts of New York City to attract people who are already used to diversity. And then, also important to most people, though, they didn't emphasize race in their advertisements. They emphasized, in most of their advertisements, I should say, they emphasized things that all homeowners would be attracted to, like good schools, as I mentioned before, like live jazz, coffee, kind of showing that South Orange has an urban feel, a very nice place to raise your home, and things like that. So those were a couple measures that they used that different groups used to integrate the community throughout the years.
That's amazing. I've lived here I moved here from Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
12 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't know any of this. This is very interesting. I mean, obviously people probably have lived here for 30, 40 years and they don't know this about how hard the community actually worked to, create such a diverse and beautiful community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I moved here, we moved straight here to South Orange, so I haven't really been exposed to other communities in the States.
Mm-hmm.
We did tour of the country kind of in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't live there, we didn't stay there, so this is very interesting. And I've had an easy time growing up here because it's such an accepting community, especially even the people in the school systems, the teachers, they're all very accepting and welcoming. And I moved here in 2001, and that's the year when 9/11 hit.
Oh man, that's that's
yeah.
rough. There was a girl from my middle school and high school, Sarah. Sarah, sorry.
Yeah.
And I remember people saying all types of insensitive things that year, and I was just like, seriously?
And honestly, I had 10 times better, I had an experience that was 10 times better than most of the people around the country that were Muslim. And I'm really happy, and I feel blessed that, we chose this community to live in because it's accepting, and the teachers were always on top of the students, making sure that kids went. Bullying happens, obviously, but they're pretty good at being on top of everything. I feel like, thank you for sharing that. I feel so much respect for your work, and I feel that's amazing.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you were interested. That you took.
No, because you're right. A lot of times people do forget because they want to focus on, the negative side of, people discriminating against race and, creating racial barriers in communities and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But your research showing a community's efforts into integrating, because like you said, it does help the community economically as well. It raises the value of the community, and I just think it's amazing that it's such a positive view on racial integration. Because usually, you're in this field, you know that most of the research that you look into or whatever you read, it's all it stems from a negative standpoint. Does that make sense? So it's refreshing to hear about you and your research, and it's such a positive message.
Yeah, and I don't want to. There is a positive message. I guess I just don't want to downplay. So it was a long
Yeah, it's definitely a
struggle
long
to get
process.
to here. So I guess the thing I want to, if possible, leave people with is that like all this work is intentional. Like we can't think, oh,
It just
once
happened.
exactly that it just happened,
Right.
and that oh, we've achieved like X percentage of like women in our, let's say you have a company, X percentage of women, X percentage of LGBT people, X percentage of African Americans, and then remove certain mechanisms that you use to achieve that level, thinking that diversity can just be maintained. Unfortunately, there's just still a natural preference for people who are just very, very similar to each other. And like, if you intentionally do these things, then yeah, communities like South Orange will be the result. So as long as you remember that, I think America will definitely stay on the right track.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's the main point of your research. That's amazing. Definitely.
Thank you so much.
People's active involvement in wanting to do this and wanting to achieve diversity within their communities is a huge part in moving us forward in society. Thank you so much. I enjoyed interviewing you. This is amazing.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to interview me. Yeah.